Hello, hello. Welcome to the Thoughtful Age podcast. And this is episode number 4. And today we are going to talking about hiring. And we will have a conversation with the hiring strategy expert. This is Viktor Matusov, AVP of Engineering at GlobalLogic. And we will cover everything related to that particular topic. So, Viktor, please tell us about yourself, about like your role at GlobalLogic, and about the experience and whatever else you want to share with us.
Yeah, hi Dmitry. Hi everyone. My name is Victor. As AVP Engineering in GlobalLogic, I lead an engineering division. It's more than 400 people globally: engineers, developers, quality engineers, designers, engineering managers, serving more than 20 clients. Some of them are Fortune 500. And we are doing amazing solutions, software solutions for them across multiple industries. Also, based on this experience, I consult founders and CEOs of smaller IT businesses in terms of how to bring their maturity up and also how to scale.
Nice, nice. Welcome, and glad to have you here as my guest today. And let's dive in then. And I have several questions to ask you today.
Cool.
When it comes to the hiring process and like hiring in general, different organizations might have different approaches, might have different pipelines, might have different views on that. Could you please describe how your organization's hiring process is set up, and how does it typically work from start to finish?
Well, I would probably start with the fact that we are hiring at scale. Pretty much as well as everything we do it at scale. Right now, as we speak, we are 30,000 engineers globally. Uh, and we are talking about roughly 10,000 hires per year for us. And obviously, we are hiring for very different positions, from intern level all the way up to C-level positions for a global corporation. And we use a multitude of sources, multitude of what we call talent acquisition engines, and also a variety of processes that are involved on every stage. I personally hire mostly either senior delivery managers, engineering director types, or top architect level engineering talent. So that's my recent hands-on experience is.
Nice, nice. But is there any difference between like hiring the engineering manager, director, comparing to hiring just a usual software engineer? And what's the difference is?
Well, there is and there isn't at the same time, right? B- Candidates for both positions are human. You need to check for hard skills and soft skills. Um, it's just a matter of numbers, right? Um, we, we we can approach we can approach, and we do approach hiring pretty much as a marketing funnel, right? You need certain success conversion rate, and you have certain numbers on the entrance of that funnel. And then when it goes about like more senior positions, by definition, uh, a company needs fewer of those, and it usually means that we as hiring managers and our partners from recruiters and employer brand marketing can dedicate more time to that process, and the process itself might get longer. It might get more sophisticated, um, uh, in order to select better, because obviously from one side, a great hiring case doesn't guarantee a great performance at the end of the day. From the other side, the cost of mistake is pretty high. With engineers, it's equally important, but we need to optimize. We need to apply economy of scale, so to speak.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. Like going through hundreds of interviews, like making the hundreds of interviews. From my experience here, totally can like emphasize on that thing that you never know how the candidate will, how the professional will start delivering and performing once hired. Disregards of how well he did on the interview. Like it could go either way. So and we here just like mitigation the mistake that we can make, or the probability of that mistake during making this hiring decision.
Right. When
Uh,
when we go into some massive hiring campaigns, we sometimes basically prioritize onboarding and probation period over the interviewing process. It's basically shifting the decision right, so to speak. So we are pretty quick in making a decision to hire. We acknowledge the fact that the risk is high that uh, or higher, that it might be a mismatch. But then during usually up to 3 months of a probation period, that's where the actual decision happens, and that's where we can pull the trigger. But usually, in the vast majority of cases, we don't part ways with candidates, and that's actually a mutual process. So it's been a while already, since the time when we had, so to speak, employer dominated labor market. So a candidate on the labor market right now is equally as important as an employer. So it's a dialogue.
right. No, I definitely like this approach because, yeah, as I mentioned before, it's very hard to determine the future performance of the candidate just from the interview experience. And I know that even some companies, they embrace this approach of having several days of the real work experience for a candidate as a part of the interview. So they actually just invite you for to work with them for like 2 or 3 days, and then they make a conclusion and make a final decision based on their experience working with you and seeing you in action. So this is quite smart move, I would say, and quite smart approach. Uh, but nevertheless, when we are in the hiring process and we are talking to the people, uh, how do you determine which qualities and skills are important for a given role? Like, I can imagine that different roles might have different requirements and might require us to look for some different attributes, for some different clues, and some different particular skills that might be required.
Right. Well, in engineering, and specifically in engineering services, where I'm coming from, um, ultimately for engineering positions, the hard skills usually are the priority, and I feel me and my colleagues being in managerial roles, we are counterbalancing that. So hard skills go first. We usually require deep hands-on engineering experts to run those interviews. Sometimes they involve some life coding exercises or maybe test tasks in a homework mode, whatever, or working on real life or close to real life challenges that are faced on a particular project or product. But then when it comes uh, to my level, I'm more focused on the soft skills, uh, and for each position, I usually have a competency matrix. Not only in mind but also documented on paper, and I basically chart a piece of paper in front of me in several squares where I mark certain notes in a particular competency. Um, so that's how I balance my engineering experts. They take care of hard skills, I take care of soft skills, but we also overlap a little bit. I check a little bit on the engineering side, they check a little bit on the teamwork side, but that's how we complement each other.
Nice. Yeah, like very collaborative thing here. And that's definitely what the majority of companies do as well. And it's like we at Kinesa do the same actually. Like we assess the hard skills, we do the coding exercise properly for all of our candidates, and then go and assessing the soft skills, how they communicate, how they might fit culturally. By the way, what about the cultural fit, and how you go about assessing a candidate in this kind of area? Are there any specific questions or exercise that you use for that?
Um, well, it starts usually with asking about past experience, and not only experience but rather thoughts in terms of whether it's difficult, whether it's easy, what exactly was the best experience, what exactly was the worst experience. Um, it also helps when you give a candidate a certain choice, like whether without a bad option, right? What is the tendency? What are professional tendencies for a candidate? Better to work alone or in the team? Better to work with code or in a Scrum meeting? Um, Better go and speak publicly and help juniors, or better work on a very difficult technical issue that no one else can do except for you. And there are no bad options, but then you know whether a person is more, so to speak, people oriented or things oriented. And the same goes for various cultures. Um, we internally know which cultures certain position will need to deal with. So we specifically ask about experience and about comparison. Who is better at what? What was candidate's experience about collaborating with a particular culture? What did he or she hear about a particular culture? What he or she thinks about certain stereotypes associated with a particular culture? And such an open-ended discussion without black and white answers usually helps to understand pretty well the position and the competency in various questions, including this multicultural aspect.
Hmm. And yeah, and always when we talk about the culture, are there any specific values that you try to identify in the candidates when, like, you're trying to assess their cultural fit to your company or to that particular position?
Uh, right. What I personally did is I adopted the values of our company, uh, gave them my personal interpretation, and I'm using them on interviews. So pretty much every company has certain official values. Not always they are equally shared between all the employees. But I decided at the very least we will be using them. They will stick better if, at least within my division, I am giving them my personal definition and
Can
um,
you give us them, like the
Sure,
personal
sure, sure,
definition?
sure. So there are four of them. Uh, Number one, in no particular order. Number one is integrity, which to me is basically honesty. Uh, to me, to a manager, it's important that my subordinate is honest with me. In good situations, in bad situation, I will hear an honest answer. That's number one. Number two is teamwork. It's not about only about the particular peers within your team. It's also teamwork with other functions, teamwork with other departments, to a certain extent, teamwork with the client, teamwork with the management, teamwork with the subordinates. So it's more of a people aspect of the work. The third one is openness, which is transparency, um, which is somewhat correlates to integrity, but it's a being open and approachable uh, throughout our vertical hierarchy. And the last one is innovation, and it's not only in a particular technical sense. It's rather, to me, even more important in a day-to-day sense from the perspective of the work process. What else can I do differently? What improvement suggestions can I make? What what feedback, what constructive feedback can I give to my peers, to other departments, to my manager, etc. So those four values and those interpretations to me give a pretty comprehensive value-based profile, I would say.
Nice, nice. Yeah, like if you strive for your organization to be aligned with those values, and then you'll be able to identify those values in your candidate, like that like is definitely will mitigate the potential hiring mistake, and then will ensure that everyone we are bringing into the teams will be like behaving accordingly, and the team will accept this person as well very well, and like everything will go on the successful path.
Keeping our fingers crossed.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Anyway, yeah, it's like as I mentioned, it's all about just mitigation the chance of this hiring mistake, but there is no way we can like avoid that at all. Like there are cases that we will need to deal with later on. Okay, how do you ensure that the hiring process is fair and unbiased? Uh, because, like, different people might behave like
From
differently
from
under
from which
stress.
perspective? From employer or employee?
No, like, if how to ensure that we evaluate everyone the same way, that we don't like uh, let our like emotion to drive our decisions here.
Um, well, maybe I voice an unpopular point of view, but to me, in any person-to-person collaboration interaction, it's arguably impossible to eliminate subjectivity. And to me, it's part of the game. People are hiring people. Uh, it's a particular match between team members, between an employee and manager is important. it's not everything, but it's a significant portion of further success. So I see no issue in certain subjectivity, and in situations where, let's say, my subordinate manager comes to me and says, "Hey, I don't feel like I will work good with such a candidate. Like, it looks like his hard skills are good, but my gut feeling tells me I would not work well with him. I couldn't explain it. I can get that, and more likely than not, I will trust my subordinate manager to do this hiring decision. I would not overpower that. But other than that, um, in order to assure like a fair play field, we make that through processes. We apply um, the same competency matrices to all the candidates within a certain role. Uh, we usually apply multiple interviewers. We have so-called trusted interviewer pool within, especially within particular technologies. Um, so, and they are well aligned, and they have thousands and thousands interviews under their belt. So they approach each candidate in a pretty scientific manner for those respected, trusted interviewers who do it all the time. Certain percentage of their workload is interviewing people. Um, the personality doesn't matter that much to them, so it's more objective, I would say. But I wouldn't eliminate subjectivity even in that scenario.
Yeah, I see. No, that makes sense. Like having structure and having the same process and having probably the same set of questions asked for all candidates can definitely mitigate this bias somehow, and will reassure that we are like not missing some good talent because of like our some bias or our some judgment that was not like very well thought out. So anyway, yeah, following the same process, and it is what everyone is suggesting, following the same, asking the same set of questions. And there's, I even seen a study which showed that, uh, like, they actually had two groups of interviewers. One group of interviews, they were interviewing people following the same process and the same structure and like asking probably the same set of questions for all of the people. And another group of interviewers, they were just conducting the interviews uh, like the way they prefer every time differently. They would ask different questions, like they would like will try to understand whether they like this person or they have common interests or whatever. And the outcomes were surprising. That that group that we're interviewing people based on the some common structure and the common set of questions ultimately hired more people that were successful in their like jobs going on after that. Uh, okay, one more tricky question for you. How do you handle situation where there are multiple strong candidates for a given role? Which factors will you consider when making a final decision?
Um, good question. So let's assume that I really need to select one, which is not always the case, and I will address that later. Um, Usually, that's where those competency matrices help. Basically, what I'm doing and many of my colleagues are doing, after each interview, we fill in, or actually during each interview, we fill in um, all the same lines in the same spreadsheet, where each candidate is basically a column, and each line is a competency. And when it gets close and it's two or more strong candidates, that's where a small details matter. A particular marks in particular competencies might make the difference. Um, and also, I don't have a competency which is called I like a person, but I do have a competency usually in my interviews, which I call energy and motivation. And that's probably the most subjective one. When I like the energy, when I like the motivation of a person, both what he or she talks about when it comes to motivation and energy questions, but also how they are doing that. So that might also be a factor. But usually, um, one of the advantages of a bigger organization, we find ways to so to speak, utilize great candidates if we have more than we expected. So I have my peers. I can seek for additional budget to hire more than I initially expected, because we appreciate how how tough labor market is lately, and how difficult it is to find great candidates. So we might look at it as a upfront investment, so to speak.
Interesting. So you mentioned this competency matrix for several times. Could you please mention some other competencies that are in that matrix? Like one of them is energy, and
Right,
anything else? Any other
right.
good
There,
examples?
there are usually up to a dozen, for me, up to a dozen competences. So and a typical profile for me is a delivery manager or engineering manager, a position which is on the intersection of technology, team management, processes, and clients. And that's, by the way, already four or five competencies that I already mentioned that are present in that matrix. And then there are some additional points like communication. Uh, uh, since the majority of my team members are from Eastern and Central Europe, and English is not a native language for them, but the vast majority of our clients are English speaking. We are internally English speaking. It's like an equalizer between cultures. So obviously, English is an important part of communication, but it's not all to communication. Um, then it's also experience with contracts and financial side of delivery. And then it might also be um, collaboration with support functions, like whether or not a candidate had experience with legal and finance and procurement and vendor management, etc. So, depending on a particular position, depending on a particular scope, it might vary, but some of them are pretty permanent.
Interesting. Yeah, yeah, those are the good examples. And when we are moving further in this hiring process, and let's say we already made this hiring decision, and there is a onboarding ahead of us and training for new hires. How do you approach this? How does this process typically looks like?
Yeah, I personally like a concept of mentorship for newcomers, and it doesn't matter whether it's a junior level or C level position. I believe every newcomer deserves a mentor to guide them through onboarding, and an ideal candidate for this mentoring position is a reporting manager, and usually it is a hiring manager. So, in the vast majority of cases, I am a mentor for my new hires, even though my typical hire is a engineering director with 10 plus years of experience in industry, with technical background, with managerial background. uh, uh, my message to them is that, okay, now we are done with the hiring process, we are into a probation period or rather onboarding period, somewhere in between 1 to 3 months depending on the plan. uh, let's forget whatever is written in your resume. Um, let's forget whatever is assumed from your background. Uh, let's start from the ground up, right? From now on, you are uh, you are expected to ask whatever dumb questions you need to ask, and you can ask them twice or 3 times. It doesn't matter. So I would hate that you the situation when you are afraid to ask questions, because you think that you are assumed to know that based on your prior experience, and then at the end of the day it will make you less efficient in your job. um, so from one hand we have a onboarding plan, when at least in the high level terms all the areas of responsibilities, all the processes, all the various aspects of job are listed. From the other side we have an iterative process based on questions and answers, and we meet usually like 3 times a week for status update and Q&A sessions. Uh, and that's where the mentoring is happening. So uh, at the end of the day, I would say it's a pretty significant amount of time, of my time, uh, but it's a worthwhile investment because, as I said at the very beginning, there is always a chance that the probation period won't be successful. Um, uh, Usually, it's a very low percentage in my experience, but still, at the very least, I want to be 100% sure that I was there for this person. I provided all the possible knowledge and experience and support from my side. And if and when I need to make a decision to terminate such a person, um, then I don't have bad feelings that I didn't do anything, because this intensity of an onboarding usually helps me to feel comfortable. And at the end of the day, in 95 plus percent of cases, it ends up not only in a successful onboarding, but in a successful working together for many years to come. Because I believe that any employee during the first weeks of their employment are it's the best period for um, forming a bond with an organization, and an important part of that, forming a bond with a reporting manager, with me in this case, and vice versa, so it works both ways. So that's how I approach it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. The first several weeks or a month is just a perfect time to ask all the questions you have. Maybe ask them several times, because I've also seen the situation when someone is coming into the organization like and don't ask anything, and in this case, I would assume either he's not motivated like to do anything, and that's why he's not asking. Either he's scared and also is not like doing anything, or whatever else might be a reason. I cannot even come up with anything else. So if you're motivated, if you're curious, you'll definitely come in and we'll start like bothering everybody around you. Like, oh, how did you do that? How that part works? How this thing is organized? How that is set up? Uh, okay. Okay, so we are coming to the end of the interview. However, there is one more interesting question I wanted to ask you. You mentioned that you're also doing the consultancy work for some smaller companies on the market. And is there any difference how they approach the hiring process? And when they come to you, do they ask you about the hiring as well? Like how it's better to do that and what is their focus there?
Well, they usually don't ask about the hiring process, or they don't associate their challenges with the hiring process. Usually, those who come to me for an advice or for a consultancy, they are more focused on scaling, on growing, on getting more new business. But then, when we started talking to them, in many cases, we realized that the organization structure is a bottleneck for the growth. And usually, too much is dependent on a founder or CEO and maybe a couple of more people themselves other than the rest of the team. And it ends up one of the first steps that we work on is transformation and growing the maturity of their structure. And um, from one side, we are building a vision of what a structure of a company capable to scale would look like, let's say, in a year. From the other side, there is a process to acknowledge what the current state is. Who are the key people on the key roles? What is their opinion on the situation and on the path forward? So we run what I would call a stakeholder interviews with them, and then together with the founder or CEO of the company, we form this future state structure. We map existing people to certain roles uh, uh, whenever it's possible. And then, only as a last piece of this puzzle, for some of the roles, we define the job description and we define, again, the competency matrices. And then we go to the market. And that's where I can also help um, act as an expert. As an interviewer for hiring certain key roles. So that's how it works with smaller businesses.
Nice. Yeah, okay. But whatever business, I believe everyone will still have several similar challenges, I would say, similar like
Right.
problems while going through
Even
the
even
hiring.
more so, the smaller the company is, uh, usually, uh, the more difficult it is for them to attract uh, great talent. So it adds up to a question of why should I join them? The candidate asks, and that's not an easy question. It's very close to the core of the business itself. It's very close to the question why the business exists. Why are they different? So that's very important for smaller businesses to understand for themselves the answer to that question.
Yeah. When the brand of the company is not well known and people just don't know what they do and what's their priority, what are their values, what are their business is. Yeah, it's difficult to make this decision. Okay, Victor, thank you for coming to me today. It was a quite interesting discussion and was pretty exciteful and insightful and pretty exciting. Excited to hear all of your thoughts and ideas about the hiring. Is there anything else you wanted to share with our listeners at the end?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me here. It was indeed a great discussion. Um, what could I share with the audience is that IT labor market, both from the employer side and from the candidate side, is a great place to be right now. It's as dynamic as ever, despite all the challenges to the economy that we are facing right now. It's still a very vibrant place, and no matter in which position you are, it's dynamic, which means it's very much alive. So great to be here together with Dmitry and together with all of you who is listening.
Okay. Thank you, Victor. This optimistic note.
Thank you.
Bye.